The first days of captivity felt unreal. The war was over for these men, but silence weighed heavier than any weapon. Hundreds of Japanese prisoners of war stood in line waiting to be processed through the barbed wire gates of an American camp. The air was thick with heat and dust, the same dust that had clung to their uniforms for months. They arrived in tattered clothes, faces streaked with sweat and grime. Their boots, worn thin from endless marches across the islands, sank into the dirt. Every step reminded them of exhaustion, defeat, and the orders that had brought them here. Some refused to look up. Others kept glancing at the guards, trying to read what kind of fate awaited them on the other side. Inside the gates, everything looked foreign. Clean lines of wooden barracks signs written in English, the faint metallic smell of machinery. It was quiet, too quiet. No one shouted, no one struck them. But the calm only deepened the unease. They had been told that surrender meant disgrace, that Americans would treat them worse than animals. Yet here, the enemy's camp looked strangely orderly. After registration and medical checks, the guards led them to a large wooden building. From the outside, it didn't look like a prison block or mess hall. Pipes ran across the ceiling and metal nozzles hung in rows. Some prisoners stopped in confusion, whispering to each other. The structure didn't resemble anything they had seen in the Pacific. The guards motioned for them to move faster. They didn't explain much, only gestured sharply toward the interior. The prisoners hesitated. The smell of soap lingered faintly in the air, a smell few of them had known for months. That small, familiar scent triggered something uneasy. They remembered rumors spread among their ranks before surrender that Americans were deceptive, that capture meant humiliation or worse. A few men exchanged fearful looks. What kind of place was this? Why were there pipes? Why was the air warm and damp? Every instinct told them to be cautious. But there was no turning back. The guards pushed them forward row by row. Behind them, the barbed wire glinted under the sun, a reminder that escape was impossible. The only way was forward into the unknown building that smelled of soap and hot metal. For the first time since surrender, the men realized they weren't being led to interrogation or punishment. Something else awaited them, something strange, perhaps even more unsettling than fear itself. The order came abruptly. The American guards barked a few words, gesturing for the men to strip down. The command spread confusion through the ranks. The prisoners froze, clutching their belts and sleeves, unsure if they had heard correctly. Then came another shout, louder this time, followed by impatient pointing toward the showers. They arrived in tattered clothes, faces streaked with sweat and grime. Their boots, worn thin from endless marches across the islands, sank into the dirt. Every step reminded them of exhaustion, defeat, and the orders that had brought them here. Some refused to look up. Others kept glancing at... Inside the gates, everything looked foreign. Clean lines of wooden barracks signs written in English, the faint metallic smell of machinery. It was quiet, too quiet. No one shouted, no one struck them. But the calm only deepened the unease. They had been told that surrender meant disgrace, that Americans would treat... A guard tossed bars of soap to the front of the line. The gesture was brisk, almost casual. Then came the hiss. From above, water burst from the nozzles in shimmering streams. It splashed onto the wooden floor, steaming in the humid air. The guards motioned for them to move faster. They didn't explain much, only gestured sharply toward the interior. The prisoners hesitated. The smell of soap lingered faintly in the air, a smell few of them had known for months. That small, familiar... Slowly, the shock gave way to confusion. The water wasn't scalding. It was clean. It washed away layers of dirt, salt, and fear. The rough bars of soap foamed thickly on their skin, foreign yet strangely comforting. A few men rubbed their arms, hesitantly testing if it was truly safe. Others closed their eyes as the grime of months dissolved into the drains. But there was no turning back. The guards pushed them forward row by row. Behind them, the barbed wire glinted under the sun, a reminder that escape was impossible. The only way was forward into the unknown building that smelled of soap and hot. One soldier, once proud and unbending, stared at his hands. The dirt was gone. His skin, pale beneath the grime, looked almost unfamiliar. He had forgotten what it felt like to be clean. Around him, the others moved in silence, caught between disbelief and relief. When the guards finally ordered them out, the men stepped forward, cautiously, dripping steam rising from their shoulders. Piles of thick cotton towels waited nearby. They dried themselves awkwardly, glancing around as if the softness of the fabric might vanish at any second. The experience was too strange to understand. Just an hour earlier, they had feared for their lives. Now they were clean, wrapped in warmth, their fear replaced by something even more unsettling: uncertainty. Had their captors shown kindness, or was this some deeper form of control? No one spoke aloud, but every man carried the same question in his eyes. That night, the barracks buzzed with quiet, uneasy talk. The men couldn't shake the memory of the steam, the pipes, the strange smell of soap that clung to their skin. Whispers spread from bunk to bunk from the corners of the dimly lit room. "What if it was gas?" one man murmured. "What if next time they close the doors?" Fear worked faster than logic. The idea took root quickly. They remembered stories told by officers, rumors about German camps in Europe where prisoners had entered showers and never returned. None of them knew the details, but the image was enough. The showers had been too organized, too efficient, too alien.
They're coming for us.
In the following days, hesitation grew. When the guards lined them up again, some men stepped back. Others wet only their arms or faces, pretending to wash. They feared the soap might be poisoned or that the steam might carry something deadly. The Americans barked orders, but suspicion lingered. Through translators, the guards tried to explain. Bathing was mandatory part of hygiene regulations. The interpreters gestured awkwardly, pointing to their arms, mimicking scrubbing motions. It was a rule, not a punishment. But for the prisoners, the explanation didn't erase the fear, it deepened it. They couldn't understand why an enemy would care whether they were clean. To them, comfort was a trap. In the Imperial Army, luxury meant weakness. Here, the enemy offered warmth, soap, and towels. It felt wrong. The confusion ran deeper than words. In Japan, bathing was sacred, a ritual of purification, tied to family community, even spirituality. Soldiers had once gathered around wooden tubs or rivers, cleansing not just their bodies but their spirits. The war had stolen that away. Months in the jungle had reduced them to surviving in filth. Now these showers were something else entirely: industrial, mechanical, devoid of ceremony. Metal pipes hissed overhead, water draining in rhythmic patterns. It felt cold and impersonal, like being processed by a machine. To the Americans, it was efficiency. To the Japanese, it was dehumanizing. Still, there was no cruelty, no hidden pain. Each day the showers returned, and each day the men emerged alive, if still uneasy. But at night, the questions wouldn't stop. Why waste clean water? Why give soap to captives? What was the purpose behind this strange kindness? The answers never came. Only more orders, more routine, more silence. The fear began to fade, but only just enough to make room for something else: curiosity. Days turned into weeks, and what began as confusion slowly became routine. Each morning, guards barked orders, and the prisoners lined up for their showers. The rhythm was strict and unchanging: roll call, meals, washing, inspection.
Name, please?
The Americans enforced it with
Okay, you're on the
military
list.
precision,
Go ahead.
as if cleanliness itself were part of discipline. At first, the men obeyed reluctantly. They shuffled forward, eyes down, moving through the motions as though it were another form of humiliation. Yet over time, something began to shift. The guards weren't punishing them. No one mocked or harmed them for being slow. The orders were firm, but the purpose was clear. Through interpreters, medics demonstrated how to wash properly. They pointed to arms, legs, hair, even between the toes. Afterward, medical officers inspected their uniforms, searching for lice rashes and infections. They issued delousing powder and fresh undergarments marked with American supply codes. To the prisoners, it felt intrusive at first, but the results spoke for themselves. Sores that had refused to heal for months began to close. Persistent coughs faded. The itching that had driven men mad during jungle campaigns finally disappeared. One corporal who had survived Guadalcanal noticed the change first. He had once gone weeks without bathing his body, covered in insect bites and open wounds. In the camp, with daily showers and clean bedding, his skin started to heal. It unsettled him. How could captivity, something meant to break him, restore what war had taken away? The irony was impossible to ignore. The same men who had marched through tropical swamps covered in dirt and disease were now cleaner and healthier in enemy hands than they had ever been under their own flag.
Yeah.
Still, pride made the adjustment difficult.
Open in the showers.
Some muttered that this was psychological warfare, a trick to soften them. Others argued that the Americans were simply showing off their abundance, flaunting luxuries Japan could never afford during the war. Yet, no matter the suspicion, their bodies told a different story. With each passing week, the barracks smelled less of decay. Blankets lost their mildew stench. Even the air seemed lighter. The men found themselves sleeping deeper, waking with fewer coughs and fevers. The guards treated hygiene like a law, not a favor.
Remember,
it wasn't about kindness, it was about control, order, and health. And somewhere in that strict discipline, the prisoners began to see an unexpected truth. Cleanliness wasn't softness, it was strength. They had been taught that endurance meant surviving filth, that a true soldier ignored pain and dirt alike. But here in the enemy's camp, they saw another form of endurance, one rooted in structure and care. And for the first time, they started to wonder which kind of discipline truly made a man stronger.
Cleanliness became their new discipline.
As weeks stretched into months, the transformation became impossible to ignore. The prisoners' faces no longer looked hollow. Their skin, once gray and cracked from salt and sweat, had begun to heal. They walked straighter, their movements less sluggish. It was as if the act of washing away dirt had also scrubbed off a layer of defeat. But the change came with an uncomfortable truth. The men had grown healthier in captivity than they had been in the Imperial Army. They remembered the islands they once fought on New Guinea, the Philippines, Burma, where rivers ran brown and disease spread faster than bullets. They had bathed in puddles, shared water rations, too precious to waste, and slept in uniforms stiff with grime. Their commanders had called that filth a badge of endurance, a mark of honor. Here the enemy demanded the opposite. The Americans treated soap and water like ammunition supplies that kept their troops strong and their camps disciplined. It wasn't generosity. It was a system. A clean soldier was an effective soldier. And now, even as captives, the Japanese men were forced to live by that same principle. At first it felt humiliating. Some still muttered that comfort was a form of weakness, that the Americans were trying to make them soft. But others began to see it differently. Maybe strength wasn't about how much dirt a man could carry. Maybe it was about how well he could maintain himself, even when the world around him fell apart. A former sergeant, his legs scarred from jungle ulcers, noticed one morning that his wounds had nearly closed. He stared at them for a long time, silent. In the field, he would have called that a miracle. Now it was routine. Another man recalled how his unit once lost half its soldiers to infection before the first battle even began. "We thought it was normal," he whispered to a comrade, "to rot while we fought." That realization spread quietly through the
If
camp.
we do not maintain proper
If the
hygiene,
Americans could
the risk
keep
of
even
infection
prisoners
spreads
this clean and
rapidly among
healthy,
us.
what did
It
that
is for the
say about
safety
their
of
own
everyone.
army, about their civilization? The irony burned. The men had been taught that to endure pain and filth was proof of loyalty. Yet here their enemy proved that order, discipline, and hygiene were just another kind of strength. At night, when the camp lights dimmed, they talked in low voices.
Must be strong.
They didn't speak of victory or defeat,
foundation.
but of soap water and what those things meant. The war had taught them to despise the enemy, but the showers had shown them something else, that the true power of a nation might not lie in its weapons, but in how it cared for its people, even its captives. And that thought was harder to accept than any loss on the battlefield.
They found strength in the care of their captors.
By autumn, the once awkward routine had become part of their lives. The guards no longer had to shout. The prisoners lined up quietly, carrying their bars of soap like daily rations. The sound of boots on gravel mixed with the hiss of steam from the shower hall, a rhythm that had replaced the drums of war. Inside, the men moved with practiced familiarity. They undressed without hesitation, stepped beneath the warm water, and scrubbed in silence. What had begun as an act of fear had turned into something almost sacred. For a few brief minutes each day, they weren't soldiers or captives. They were simply men, alive, clean, and human again. They began to take pride in the details. Towels folded neatly, boots arranged in straight rows. Some even competed quietly over who could lather faster or leave the stalls the cleanest. The showers, once symbols of humiliation, had become rituals of dignity. One prisoner, an older sailor from Yokosuka, once refused to wash thoroughly. Now he lingered under the streams longer than allowed, closing his eyes as the water flowed down his face. "It reminds me of home," he whispered one day. The others said nothing, but they understood. Cleanliness had become a language of survival. It was structure inside chaos, a way to reclaim control when everything else was dictated by guards and fences. The act of bathing no longer felt like submission. It felt like recovery. Each man found small comforts in the process, the warmth of water easing stiff muscles, the smell of soap cutting through the stale air of the barracks, the quiet moment where no one shouted or ordered them to fight. In those moments, they could almost forget the barbed wire outside. Some guards noticed the change too. They saw how the prisoners began to carry themselves with a hint of discipline. Again, beds made tight floors, swept clean uniforms, folded with care. It was as if cleanliness had reignited a sense of order long buried under exhaustion. The camp felt different now. The air didn't carry the stench of rot, but a faint scent of disinfectant and damp cotton. Coughs faded. The scratching of lice had stopped. Men who had once stared blankly at the floor now met each other's eyes. They were still prisoners, but they had regained a fragment of pride. What began as obedience had become something deeper, a way to remember who they were before the war stripped them of their humanity. In the steam and water, they found not just cleanliness, but redemption.
Cleanliness had become a quiet faith.
Over time, the fear that once haunted the barracks gave way to quiet reflection. The men had grown used to the warmth, the soap, the smell of detergent that clung to their clean uniforms. But now a new kind of question began to surface, a thought they could no longer ignore. If the Americans treated prisoners this way, how much better must they treat their own soldiers? The idea spread slowly, almost shamefully, as though speaking it aloud betrayed their loyalty. Yet it lingered. Every neatly folded towel, every hot shower, every bar of soap handed without cruelty made them wonder what kind of world existed beyond those fences. Some remembered the army back home officers who barked orders rations that never came, wounds that festered because medicine was scarce. They compared that to the order of this camp, The daily meals, medical checks, inspections, and yes, the constant demand for cleanliness.
The sky looks
It
clear
was
enough.
discipline, but not the kind that destroyed. It maintained. A prisoner who once served as a mechanic whispered one evening, "If they care this much for the hygiene of captives,
Easy now,
maybe
just
that's
keep
why their
breathing.
soldiers don't
We're getting
fall
you
apart."
stabilized.
His words were met with silence,
that
but no
plasma
one
now.
argued. The thought stung too deeply. For years they had been told that the enemy was decadent, weak, corrupted by comfort. Yet here they stood stronger in body and calmer in mind than they had been under their own flag. The contradiction cut like a blade. Some grew resentful. They said the Americans were trying to erase their pride to replace Japanese endurance with softness. But others began to sense something different. Maybe this order, this insistence on health and hygiene wasn't weakness at all. Maybe it was the foundation of strength itself. The more they thought about it, the more unsettling it became. If America could afford such discipline, such abundance, even for those it had defeated, what kind of power did it hold?
Did you hear the news?
When they spoke quietly in the mess hall, they didn't talk about battles anymore. They talked about water pressure soap and towels. They wondered how many showers an American soldier could take back home. Some laughed at the absurdity, others fell silent, realizing that the question itself revealed how far their world had fallen behind. The guards didn't know the effect they were having. To them it was just routine hygiene order procedure. But for the prisoners, it was revelation. Every drop of hot water carried a message. This is what civilization looks like when it's built on abundance instead of desperation. And that realization was both humbling
We
and
all felt
terrifying.
it, that quiet ache of envy. But beneath it, a deeper respect for what we could not yet achieve.
Months later, as the war ended and repatriation began, the Japanese prisoners prepared to return home. Yet, among the memories they carried defeat, surrender, the sting of captivity, one stood out with startling clarity: the showers. They would never forget that first rush of hot water, the shock, the fear, and the strange comfort that followed. Some described it years later to their families, trying to explain how something so ordinary had changed the way they saw the world. Their wives and mothers often looked at them in disbelief. How could a simple shower leave such an impression? But it wasn't just about water or soap, it was about everything it represented. Those showers had been their first glimpse into a different kind of order, a world where even prisoners were kept clean, where health and dignity were considered necessities, not luxuries. It challenged everything they had been taught about strength and weakness. One former corporal, recalling his time in the camp, said quietly, "I thought the enemy would strip us of our humanity. Instead, they gave some of it back." That sentiment echoed across countless testimonies. The men who once dreaded the showers had come to see them as a form of restoration. They left the camp not only with healed bodies, but with a lingering sense of awe and perhaps envy.
I don't know why, but
The United States, they realized, was not powerful merely because of its weapons or armies, but because of its systems, its efficiency, its belief that order began with the smallest human details. Many of the former prisoners kept those lessons alive long after they returned to Japan. Some insisted on bathing daily, even when resources were scarce. They taught their children that cleanliness was a kind of discipline, not indulgence. For them, hygiene became a quiet act of remembrance, a way to honor what they had learned behind the wire. To outsiders, the memory of a camp shower might seem trivial, but to those men, it marked a turning point. It revealed that the line between cruelty and care could be thinner than they ever imagined. They had entered those showers expecting death. They walked out having discovered a truth about life.
They entered expecting death and found life instead.
The water changed them we, and through them, it changed us all.
The hydroponic system recirculates the water, minimizing waste while maximizing nutrient delivery directly to the root structures.
You're finally here. I waited so long. I told you I would return. It is finished.
At first, I didn't want to accept it either. But the evidence is clear. There was nothing else we could have done.
Here, the future was rebuilt with purpose.
Rub your palms like this, and don't forget between your fingers. Good, now rinse them clean.
In the quiet moments, stripped bare, we are all just water and...
Look at that smile,
We were so happy then, weren't we?
the happiest day